Hey guys, this is Justin. Hello and welcome to another video. So, episode 9 of The Bad Batch Season 3 just dropped and it is called The Harbinger. It features the return of Asajj Ventress, something I was initially going to try to keep on the down low in my title and thumbnail and whatever else, but StarWars.com has been openly advertising it on their YouTube and on their Twitter. I think they're trying to use it to get people in, so let's talk about Asajj, why her inclusion in this episode was a bit weird, why I think there's a lot more going on, and what happened last time we saw Asajj, which, and this may be surprising for some of you, was not in the Clone Wars. Before we get to that though, I do just want to briefly touch on the episode's title, The Harbinger. A Harbinger is like a messenger or a precursor to a thing, and to me, my mind is immediately going to that last conversation between Asajj and Hunter. She warns that the Bad Batch is not as safe on their little island paradise as they believe, and I think her warning will be brought to light in a very near episode when the Empire shows up and wreaks havoc in that search for Omega. Before I continue the Asajj talk though, I do just want to say I really liked the episode overall. I thought it was a standout visually. I really liked the first half, which really took place as the sun was setting. I continue to really enjoy the relationship between Omega and Crosshair specifically. His personal development has been super interesting, how ready he was to defend her when Asajj even alluded to that she might take her away. And obviously the big, it's not even a revelation, we've known for a while that Omega has to be somewhat force sensitive. I mean, it was hinted at in earlier seasons, pretty much confirmed at the beginning of this season. What degree she'll explore that obviously remains to be seen, especially because we're near the end of season 3 and thus the Bad Batch as a series, but I think we'll talk more about that in just a moment. Alright, so Asajj, first of all, it was great to see Asajj back, and she's very different than she's been, at her full evil ways. And I have to say, I'm sort of lamenting the loss of the Dark Disciple Clone Wars arc, because it's really clear upon reading the book that they're essentially continuing with that story as if it had been shown in the Clone Wars, which is not surprising because Dark Disciple was adapted to a novel in Star Wars canon. We actually covered it on my podcast Tapcaf Transmissions right before the Bad Batch season started, and it's actually a pretty weird book. I'm going to talk about it briefly, but it reads a lot like an adapted Clone Wars episode arc. There's so many like silly action scenes that would fit right in the show when they're padding for time that probably should have been cut out. But on the other hand, the characterization of Asajj and also Quinlan Vos, who also stars in the book, is really well done. And this would have been a fairly hefty Clone Wars arc, at least 6 or 7 episodes. In short, Asajj Ventress is out on her own, operating as a bounty hunter, not unlike presumably what she's doing now. She's contacted by Quinlan Vos. Initially, he's undercover, but he comes clean and basically wants her help to kill Count Dooku. She agrees, they train together, they fall in love. They fail to kill Dooku. Quinlan falls to the dark side. Fake falls to the dark side a bunch of times. It's kind of messy. But at the end, in a final face-off with Dooku, they reconcile. However, Asajj is seemingly killed by the Force lightning of Dooku. Now, there's obviously a lot of discussion regarding whether she actually died, whether it was intended for her to die, either in the TV show or in the actual novel. For me, I'll say, reading it outright, I didn't see her as potentially coming back. Obviously, I read the novel after her return to the Bad Batch had already been announced in that trailer, but I don't know, it seemed pretty clear to me. However, they also did leave things open. Notably, when Asajj dies, Quinlan returns her to the ancestral waters of Dathomir, which begin to glow green upon accepting her body. Dathomir plus green lights, you can make a lot happen if you need to. However, my question is, has Asajj delivered on the promise given by Brad Rao before the series aired, which was, we don't want to spoil anything, but want fans to know that any new storytelling with Ventress will align with the events of Star Wars Dark Disciple, i.e. the story where she dies. And I mean, so far, not really. We do get some allusion to her having multiple lives, or having multiple lives left, said somewhat coyly towards the end of the episode. That I think is a wink and a nod at her being, supposedly 6 feet under. But to me, this is also very clearly not the last time we'll see Asajj. Will it be the last time we'll see Asajj in the Bad Batch? Perhaps. I do think it's possible, however, that the series and the characters are moving to a future where we do see Omega traveling and training with Asajj somewhat full time. We see in Star Wars Dark Disciple that she's a different character than she was at her worst during the Clone Wars. It's actually a quite compelling character where there's a lot of vulnerability underneath, but years of abuse and trauma, and she's also just kind of an asshole a lot of the time as well. One of the reasons I think Asajj and Omega could end up together is an interview on the Hollow Files. It was with Omega's actress Michelle Ang, and she talks about her favorite moments in the series, and in particular, the very end. She describes how quite clearly the series culminates to one point where Omega has two pretty clear lines in front of her. I think one of those lines would be staying with the Bad Batch, or at least everyone who's still alive at that point, where the other line is traveling with Asajj. It also seems clear to me that the story they were planning to tell and are going to tell in the Bad Batch is nowhere near over and cannot be summed up in the remaining episodes of Season 3, and I think it's pretty clear that this show is going to transition into something else. One thing that does give me some pause is where Aang talks about potential alternate endings for the show, which were at least conceptualized, and she said Omega was set up with the possibility of a very large future in the Star Wars galaxy, and it changed from there. Aang described this new ending as bittersweet. However, alongside today's episode, we did also get a companion piece on StarWars.com. It's pretty interesting, goes into the character of Asajj as she appears now, a lot of what I already discussed about how she is changed, and I do think that's also deserved. But there were a couple of lines that I thought were really interesting, including the final one of the piece. Though Ventress walks away from the Bad Batch and Omega in the end, there's a feeling that the future is wide open, or as Futterman says, that Asajj could do anything and become anything. I think we're going to find out a lot of things about a lot of things, and I think we're going to have all kinds of fun adventures. Another line, we had several discussions about the book and how her story should continue, Corbett explains. How she survived will be revealed in future content, but for this story, we were thrilled to include her and explore her unique connection to and compassion for Omega. To me, that makes it pretty clear that she's done appearing in the Bad Batch, but I think she is going to be in a future series. I think we're going to continue the sort of timeline, the, legacy of the Clone Wars, and the next show will be one featuring Asajj Ventress, and maybe Omega as well. But I guess we'll see. Otherwise, as I mentioned, I thought this was a really enjoyable episode. I gotta say, I'm really bummed that the Bad Batch is ending. Really bummed. It's been so nice to have a bit of Star Wars to look forward to every week for months on end. I mean, it does remind me, obviously, of the Clone Wars when I was a kid, or Star Wars Rebels when I was older. Hopefully we get more. That's all I've got, though. See you next time. Bye-bye.